Hi, welcome. It's working. Welcome, everybody. It's difficult to compete with the Kava session and the jazz session and the jam. Please tell me when we are officially starting. No? Are we all prepared? Yeah? Oh, okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Ethics and Technology Open event of the 4th Unite Dialogue that we are celebrating here in Barcelona. My name is Eva Vidal. I am an associate professor at the Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya. I am presenting this session in representation of the group of professors of the 7 universities that work in Task Force 9.4. The goal of this task force is to create a think tank to sustain a profound discussion on diverse issues involving ethics, sustainability, and technology. We believe that students must be competent in identifying the environmental and social impacts of technology. I am very sorry to announce that our invited speaker, Manuela Battaglini, has not been able to come to Barcelona. She has a fever. The flu still exists. She sent us her apologies, and we all desire to Manuela a quick recovery. Let me change that. Luckily, Professor Ricardo Vinoso from KTH is with us and will give us a more than interesting speech about AI and its impact on SDGs. We have a really exciting program. After the presentation of Ricardo, a group of students will share with us their views on ethics and technology. Be prepared to interact with the proposals. Use your phone or tablet to answer the questions. Instructions on how to interact with their questions will be given during the presentation. Thanks, Anna Thanker, Carolina Crespo, Daria Bogli, Gaspar Melcion, Maria Nordstrom, Maria Ribot, and Sara Camacho. Thanks, all of you for your time and your commitment. You make us think optimistically about the future. Thank you. Let's start with the presentation of Dr. Ricardo Vinoso. Ricardo is an associate professor at the Department of Engineering Mechanics at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. He's also a researcher at the AI Sustainability Center in Stockholm and vice director of the KTH Digitalization Platform. He received his PhD in Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering from the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. His research combines numerical simulations and data-driven methods, understand and model complex world-bounded turbulent flows, shows as the boundary layers developing around winds. He has also led a number of international initiatives on AI and sustainability, leading to highly influential articles in this field. Dr. Vinuesa's research is funded by the Swedish Research Council and the Swedish E-Science Research Center. He has also received in the Goran Gustafsson's Award for Young Researchers and the Outstanding Alumnus Award from IIT in Chicago. Ricardo, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, Eva. It's a real pleasure for me to be in warm Barcelona. Today I'm going to talk about sustainability and artificial intelligence, in particular on the role of AI on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. My department is engineering mechanics at KTH, and my research is funded by the Göran Gustafsson Foundation and also by the Swedish eScience Research Center. And then I want to put things in context a bit. As many of the people in this session know, we're going to use the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which is a group of targets of the United Nations towards 2030. This is the agenda of sustainability that wants to be achieved. And just for you to get an idea, there is a very wide range of topics that are encapsulated in these SDGs, ranging from poverty to climate to many other topics. So to be able to do studies in the context of the SDGs requires multidisciplinary research and a quite collaborative approach to be able to get meaningful input on this. Essentially, what we want to answer is the question of whether there is published evidence on the impact of AI on the SDGs. In particular, we're going to look at the 17 SDGs and the 169 targets that are inside those SDGs. And in order to do that, one needs to adopt a multidisciplinary approach. So we gathered a quite complete team from all over the world so we could meaningfully address this question. The results that I'm going to be talking about today are published in this article that you see on the bottom in Nature Communications 2020. So this is one of these studies that reached quite some impact because of the novelty of assessing what is really the effect of AI on all these targets that we really need to strive to achieve in 9 years from now. So if we look at the composition of the team, you can see there is a quite wide range of areas. We have experts in applied AI, more fundamental AI, social interaction, ethics, economy, also experts in biodiversity, land on water and land under the sea. And also we have experts in sustainability, as well as some quite high-profile people like Max Tegmark from MIT, who has been looking at AI and sustainability for quite some time. So we could have a quite complete and balanced approach when trying to assess the impact of AI on sustainability. In particular, what we did was to look at 3 big groups. So we took the 17 SDGs and we divided them into 3 main areas: the economy, the society, and the environment. This is a quite standard classification, but this allows us to obtain, to have a holistic view and to really divide the results that we achieve into these 3 main topics that we have. So after looking at this division into these 3 categories, what we did was to go for each of the targets, each of the 169 targets. We went into the literature and we performed what is called an expert elicitation process. The article in Nature Communications, we have a very long supplementary material. So for each, as you can see in the screen, for each of the targets, we have what are the positive, in this case the green, or negative, in this case the orange, effects of AI on that particular target. We have a bunch of references documenting our findings, and we have a reasoning. So we have quite some text justifying the statements that we made. We have 5 or 6 references for each of the targets. And the way that this worked is that we had first experts assigned to each of the SDGs. In this case, you can see on the top, Sami and Simone, 2 of the experts in our group. They did a first assessment. Then we also had reviewers. You see on the second line, Yolanda and myself. We evaluated this SDG. And what we did was to, basically evaluate, provide comments, discuss with them. And we had this expert elicitation in a process that is iterative. So we had a discussion until all of us agreed. We tried to have complementing areas of expertise. So the experts were more into the topics of the SDG at hand, and the reviewers had different perspectives so that we could have a more holistic perspective on this on this assessment. So you can see that, well, we converge to a certain assessment of AI for that particular SDG. And doing that for all the SDGs, we can look at all the results that we have in the 3 main areas that I mentioned before. First of all, the results that we obtain are mostly positive. 79% of the targets can be positively affected by AI, which is good news. But of course, that's something that should not undermine the negative effects, right? 35% of the targets can be experiencing negative effects because of the AI development. And we should not forget one thing. Even one target having negative effects of AI can be enough to completely destroy all the progress and all the positive effects that we have on the other side. So we have to be aware of the negative effects, we have to be aware of the challenges and limitations so that we can develop adequate regulation and adequate practices. I'll be talking about that a bit more later in the presentation. Looking at these 3 groups, what we see is that the environment is the area with the highest positive potential. 93% of the targets can be positively affected by AI, whereas perhaps the society could observe and could perceive some of the biggest challenges, with 38% of the targets exhibiting risks associated to the development of AI. Okay? But we want to look at more detailed assessments of this. We want to look at each of the individual SDGs. So what you see on the left is for each of the SDGs, the percentage of targets that are positively affected by AI, and on the right, the percentage of targets for each of the SDGs that can be negatively affected by AI. There are 2 lines, the thin color and the darker color. Just to give you an idea, the thin color does not take into account the strength of the evidence, whereas the darker color is an additional assessment that we made, where we take into account how strong is the evidence of positive or negative effects. Okay? So what you can see here, and you can of course go into the paper later to look at more individual examples and more particular assessments, what I want to focus on is on the differences between the light and the darker color. So what is the result of obtaining the darker color? For all the papers that we found, and we are talking about hundreds of papers, we classified them into 4 different categories from A to D. A papers are the ones that contain evidence that can be, well, it can be generalized, it can be extended, and it can be robust enough, and that has a weighting factor of 1, all the way down to D types of reference, where we have more speculative results, perhaps less easy to generalize, and that's what we call a D type of reference. This weighting factor, what it does is that we essentially consider what percentage of the target can be affected, for good or for bad, by that reference. So having a D type of reference being positively affected on a target would actually count as 0.25 of that target actually being affected. Of course, what that's going to produce, when I take into account the strength of the evidence, is the darker color that we were seeing before. And the darker color is going to be, or the darker area that you see in this picture, is going to be smaller or equal than the light area, because the weighting factors go from 0.25 to 1. So what is interesting here is 2 things. Let's compare the light and the dark area in both the positives and the negatives. What we can see is that in the environment and the society, the light color and the dark color in the positive effects is almost the same. There is almost no reduction when I take into account the strength of the evidence. However, in the negatives, there is a significant reduction when I am actually looking at the darker color. This means that the research documenting negative effects of AI on the environment and the society is perhaps less robust. That could be a research gap. But another interesting thing is when we look at the positive effects on the economy. There we actually see a very big reduction between the light and the dark color, which means that another important research gap is when it comes to positive effects of AI on the economy. That research is maybe not so substantiated, maybe not so easy to generalize, and of course that's probably one of the areas where one could focus on in the mid and long term. So that's really this strength of the evidence is an interesting tool for us to be able to identify these research gaps of AI and sustainability. Okay? More things. Well, besides the effect of AI on the SDGs, another interesting aspect is the concrete examples that we can have. Here I'm just going to mention some areas. I mean, again, in the paper you can really see hundreds of examples, but if we look at positive effects, generally the positive effects of AI on the SDGs come from new technologies that were not available before, essentially. For example, in the context of SDG 1 on no poverty, well, there is work documenting the usage of satellite images and convolutional neural networks to be able to track poverty and to design, well, worldwide, more global approaches and strategies to be able to predict and alleviate the development of poverty zones. Negative effects, well, very clearly on SDG 10 on reducing inequalities. One problem is that if the future is going to rely on AI and not everybody is going to have the same type of access to this technology, then obviously we're going to increase and exacerbate the current inequalities that we have. So this is really an important area to keep in mind, especially knowing that remote access to HPC centers is possible so that we can, well, create a future where everybody can have the same type of possibilities in the newer economies and the newer societies. Okay? So this is basically two examples of positive and negative effects, generally. Let me go a bit more into some concrete areas. If I go in the context of the energy and the environment, I mean, it is possible to use AI for optimizing grid consumption and electricity usage. It's also possible, and I will be talking about this at the end of the presentation. I'll provide a practical example. It's also possible to use AI to try to reduce the air pollution in cities. Let's remember that 800,000 people die every year in Europe because of the pollution levels, in contrast to what some politicians say sometimes. This is a big problem. And AI can really help in the context of this. Negative effects. Well, we should not forget that these models, these AI models, are trained on very large HPC centers. They require a lot of energy, of electricity, and we are going from ICT, information and communication technologies, from 1% of the total electricity consumed nowadays to around 20% that is estimated in 10 years, which is, well, huge and I would say worrisome, right? So this is something to keep in mind. This is something to be aware of. We should not train models just because we can. We should not just use larger data sets just because we can. We should be responsible and aware of the environmental and economical cost of training these models. In particular, when there are many times that we know things about the data that should be embedded in those models. I'm talking about the context of physics-informed neural networks, physics-aware deep learning models. Of course, if you know something about the data, you should embed it in the model. You should not let the data learn it by itself, because you will never get it with the same level of accuracy, and you're going to use resources in an irresponsible way. You don't need to train a model to learn that you already know. Okay? So this is a little bit in the context of negative effects and threats that we could have associated with AI. I would like to mention a couple of things in the context of social effects. We live in very problematic and challenging times in the context of Corona. I would say that in the SDG 10 of reducing inequalities can be also negatively affected by the polarization of the societies. We all know that the algorithms are biasing what we see in the social media, what we see on the internet, and of course that's even affecting the results of elections. And to kind of try to aim at having stronger institutions, we should aim at not regulatory oversight, but more importantly, regulatory insight. So we should be aware of having experts in the working groups that are developing AI regulations, so things are not purely political. So things are also based on what AI can and cannot do, so we can really achieve the best development of this technology. Why is that? Well, AI is really affecting everybody's lives. Either if we want it or not, it's going to happen, and we should really establish a global dialogue so everybody can be part of it and everybody can know basically what's going to be the impact of this technology in their lives. So this is important, and I would say that we should really prioritize the involvement of technical people in these committees so the regulations are conducted adequately. A couple of examples of how data-driven methods can really affect situations of our daily lives. This is in the context of the COVID-19 contact tracing apps. This is an article that I wrote with Manuela, who should have been here today, and we published it last year in Results in Engineering. So this has to do with the ethical and technical requirements of the contact tracing apps. One important thing, this has impacts on SDG 3, on health, and also SDG 10, on inequalities. It's essential to consider the centralized data gathering. This is something that, at the end, all the apps were aware of, but not when we wrote the paper. The UK app was struggling with this bit. And you can see here our evaluation of 3 different apps from last year, from Austria, the UK, and Singapore, and also the European Data Protection Board guidelines. So we were actually more restrictive than the European guidelines, especially when it comes to the governance of the apps, which is maybe the area that was not so well thought of, and I believe one of the most important ones, as we saw that in the end these apps were not so widely used, and perhaps a big responsibility of that comes from the lack of transparency in the communication strategies for these contact tracing apps. Another example, well, this is, we can summarize in a way all these interactions that take place between all the agents involved in this process. We have the technology, the individuals, and the government. The thickness of the arrows indicates the speed of change, so how quickly things are being affected. And as we can see, technology is changing very fast. Individuals are lagging behind, so they try to catch up with the new technology that is being developed. And all of them, both the technology and the individuals, are really imposing changes in the governments that are really way ahead of what the governments can do to keep up in terms of new standards, in terms of new regulations, and in terms of adequate testing procedures. Right? So this interaction of these 3 agents takes place with the environment as an underlying layer, where we interact with resources. We also have positive and negative impacts on the environment, unfortunately more negative than anything else. And this is, well, a good way to kind of summarize all these dynamics that we can easily investigate in this development of AI that we are experiencing. I would say that another important aspect of AI development is interpretability. As many of you know, deep learning models are typically not interpretable. That's also problematic, because if we cannot understand how are decisions being made, then it's going to be very difficult to get responsibility, to get accountability, and to be able to use these models in a meaningful way for generalization. There are some strategies to try to add explainability, but not full interpretations of what the AI model is actually being doing. And we have a recent paper published this year in Nature Machine Intelligence, where we advocate for having other strategies that help us to add that interpretability. For example, the method by Kramer and others using inductive biases is quite promising, and we also propose some other aspects there that can be helpful. So in the end, we should really try to develop interpretable models. In the end, we need to have transparent and context-aware applications if these are going to be used in areas that impact our lives. So this is about interpretability, and of course this also has implications on the SDGs. Here I'm showing an example of how using interpretable models in the context of the prediction of poverty can really help us not only to predict if there is poverty or not in a certain area, but also the temporal dynamics, knowing the terms, the algebraic equations that are relating the input data with the prediction of per capita consumption, that can help us to understand the temporal dynamics of how these things are happening and anticipate before an area is really at risk, that we can really have measures that are more meaningful. Okay? So I would say interpretability is actually essential in this context. And now, in this second part, I'm going to focus on one example. So I have given you an overview of how different areas can be affected and how I can use AI for good. I can use it also for bad, and I should avoid that. Let's look at the example of SDG 11 and SDG 13. SDG 11 on sustainable cities, 13 on climate action. And most of the, essentially all the targets of these SDGs can be positively affected by AI development. Therefore, there are a lot of opportunities here. And one area where I want to focus is that of urban pollution. So remember the 800,000 people per year, that's a lot. I'm going to show you one example. I will not go into a lot of details. I will just give you some highlights of how can one use AI to try to understand and predict the pollution levels in cities and hopefully try to, well, use it for good in order to tackle this challenge that we have. I'm using very detailed flow simulations. I will not go into the details of the simulations, but essentially what you see on the left is an obstacle that represents one building, and there you can really see very fine meshes. These are simulations. These are called direct numerical simulations. You can really see the details of the structures, the details of the flow around these buildings, and what I want to do is to go from sparse measurements. So I have, you can see there a bunch of black dots. Those are sensors. From a bunch of individual sensors, I want to be able to reconstruct the three-dimensional volume of the flow, the temperature, and the pollution levels in the city. So I want to be able to enhance the acquired data in such a way that I can get three-dimensional fields to be able to detect areas of peak of pollution and also develop better measures to alleviate these levels of pollution in the cities. So I'm combining numerical simulations and AI to be able to do this, to do non-intrusive sensing, in other words, measuring few points and reconstruct much more data than what I'm actually measuring. Again, these are some mathematical details. I will not go too much into details. What you can see on the right are three examples. So I'm having two obstacles that I'm changing their separation, so you can really see how the flow changes. And I'm using sensors to reconstruct, from those individual measurements, the whole 3D volume of data, including LSTMs, CNNs. I will show you a little bit of some results using GANs, and I will tell you more about these architectures. So essentially, I'm using deep learning to be able to reconstruct the three-dimensional volume of data from these sparse measurements in the city. And this is one example. I mean, I'm not going to enter too much into it, but you can imagine having as an input the information on the floor, on the wall. So basically those black dots over here, that's the input. The output is the flow velocities at different locations. And I'm trying to go from one to the other so that I can present you a practical example of how AI can help. I'm not just going to tell you that there are all these papers that say that there is potential. I'm going to show you that there is potential with a practical example. So I'm using, on the left, there are some measurements that I'm making, and on the right, there are some predictions of the velocities at different locations away from the wall. And to do that, I'm using what you see at the middle. There is a convolutional neural network, without being too technical, but essentially the convolutional network is able to exploit spatial features in the data. So the structures, the correlations, all those patterns that you see on the left are being used by the convolutional network to make the predictions on the right. And the deeper the network, the more complicated the predictions that can be made. The more complex those structures can be really formed to make those predictions. And again, my goal is to predict the flow, predict the temperature, predict the pollutants away from the location where I'm actually measuring. There is another method that you see here where I can actually decompose the data into space and time. I will not enter too much into it, but essentially what I'm trying to do is being able to not just predict the flow itself, but predict some of the temporal dynamics of the flow, so I can actually do it in a bit of a more consistent and robust way. And these are some results. Just for you to guide a little bit what are the interesting things, the third row is the reference. The last row is the neural network prediction, and the second one is another method from another neural network prediction. So what you can see is that with these methods, we can actually get very, very good results, very robust results. Looking at some more quantitative data, if this wants to go forward, yes. I can tell you that for regions that are very energetic close to the input, I get less than 1% error, so that's really quite accurate. I can actually, with quite some accuracy, I can reconstruct the flow and the patterns present in the data, which of course that can help me later on to understand the temperature and the pollution. So with this methodology, which is published this year as well, so if you're interested in the technical aspects, you can find it there. And one last thing, what happens if I have very sparse measurements? what I'm showing you there is the example of when those black dots, those sensors, are very, very far away. So I have very little information about my input, about the information at the wall. What I'm using is a neural network that is called GAN, a Generative Adversarial Network. You can see a schematic representation of it on the left. Essentially, I have two parts of that network, one that is trying to build high-resolution images from low-resolution images, and the other one, the discriminator, that is trying to understand which ones of these images are original or which ones have been generated by the other network. These two networks are trained together using game theory, and in the end, they work pretty well. And we are able to obtain very accurate representations of the flow from very, very sparse measurements. So even for sensors, for black dots that are very, very far away from each other on very, very broad grids, we actually get results that are in quite good agreement with the reference. Here the reference is the top row. Of course, the more sparse the measurements, the less accuracy that I get, but I'm still always able to recover physically meaningful results that contain a wide range of energetic scales in this flow. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. These are my conclusions. Essentially, I would like to stress again the impact that AI is having in our lives and the importance of being aware of all the positive and negative effects, how we can all be parts of this global debate so that we can contribute for the better. And I would also like to highlight some of the research gaps and some of the lacking ethical standards that we need to jointly develop with people who are technical so that these decisions are driven by science for once, let's say. Thank you very much. This is my information, my email, you can see it on the bottom, my social media, and also my lab's web. So if you have any comments or questions, you can ask them now, but I'm always happy to answer any questions online or by social media. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks. Hi, I actually have a question. So you were talking about we need ethical standards, and I totally agree with that. Actually, I'm writing my bachelor thesis about AI, and what I found is that I think we all who are working with AI know this, that data has a lot of impact. And we know that we have a lack of data in certain places, especially when we're talking about gender equality and women and stuff like that. So did you consider that while looking at the positive and negative effects of AI, that we have a lack of data in that field?
Sorry, I didn't fully hear. If I consider what? Can you repeat that?
The lack of data we have in certain fields.
In certain fields and in certain areas. We actually just published earlier this year another paper where we look at data deprivations and digital divides. This paper is in Big Data and Society, Naude and Vinuesa. I can share it with you afterwards. So we actually argue how challenging it is that in certain areas, mostly in developing countries, the lack of data is actually critical. And even if you want to have proper measures for tackling a pandemic, but also tackling a climate emergency, that's going to be critical, and how AI can potentially help in that. But yes, I mean, the lack of data, especially in certain areas, it's challenging. And in certain fields we discuss in our paper, there are some, well, of course, research gaps. And I guess what I presented about the strength of the evidence helps to identify some of those research gaps, so one can devote a bit more research there to get more meaningful data. But the topic of the lack of data in certain countries is very important. So I can share that reference with you if you're interested.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sara, and I have been working along with my teammates, Ana, Carolina, Daria, Gaspar, Maria, and Maria, in a task force regarding this subject of ethics and AI. So we're going to present you what we've worked on, and hopefully we can have some debate. So just to break the ice, first of all, I would like to know how many of you that are here in the room joined online, registered online to come to this event? You should all have, so yeah, that's right. So when you registered online, how many of you opened the terms of agreement to register for the event and read them? Okay, that was what I was hoping for. And just a last question, how many of you usually do this? No matter if you accept the cookies or you reject them, how many of you read them? Every time, like, you read them before rejecting them? Awesome, I am a fan. So, well, just keep that in mind while you listen to my teammates and while we debate a little bit, and I would like to open the floor for my teammate Daria, who's going to speak a little bit about how AI is affecting our choice matter.
Hello to everybody. Today we would like to talk to you about choice. To start with, let's look to the story of a farmer. A farmer had a very good worker. One day the farmer told him, "I must go into town for the day. The only job while I'm away is to prepare for the market those few bushels of potatoes we harvested yesterday by sorting them into 3 piles, big potatoes, medium ones, and small ones." At the end of the day, the farmer returned and was surprised to see that the worker had very little progress sorting the potatoes. "So why so little work done?" He asked. "I was surprised you'd be finished by now." That was the problem. The worker replied, "It's all those difficult decisions." So the story shows us that in a simple question like the size of potato, we can find a lot of difficulties when we need to choose. It also can be related with the lack of information or comparison when we're working with something. But what if we need to make a more complex decision rather than the size of potato? It can also be problematic in the question of place of AI in our lives nowadays. With AI tools, there are essentially 3 types of agents making choices: the people making artificial intelligence, the people using it, and of course artificial intelligence itself. Ideally, we'd like every agent involved to make the best possible choice. But what do we need in order to make a choice? First and foremost, we need a freedom and ability to do it. But if we hope to make good choices, we will need a good information of which to have those choices. But what counts as a good information? Or even good choice? Good for whom? Often, in order to develop the AI industry, their creators might more be economically oriented than problem-solving oriented. AI algorithms are made to match people with the ads for the products they are most likely to buy. Is definitely good for the companies that sell those products, but not necessarily for the people buying them. At the same time, we can say that nowadays artificial intelligence is in the stage that we still need a lot of data and algorithms in order to create an intelligence. Then it means that its creator puts his vision on how AI should work and make autonomous choices. But can we say that those algorithms are based on universal definitions of ethics and decision-making? Do we even have those universal definitions? Speaking of artificial intelligence itself, it is also possible to say that AI's algorithms are becoming more sophisticated. It means that at some point it is already an autonomous intelligence, who can make its own choices. Here we can be stuck in a philosophical question of understanding the other. We cannot say how AI makes its decisions, and we might not want to be a part of AI decisions. Let's speak about real example, where people were involved directly in artificial intelligence decision-making. Everybody knows the Amazon company and its technological development. The automation of their processes is the base of their economic success, as the simplification of everyday tasks demand less resources. In 2014, the company decided to use artificial intelligence in order to classify the CV of applicants for the job. This way, there is no need to verify hundreds of CVs by people, but then it can only take the CVs which are AI classified as the best ones. The problem arose within a year when Amazon realized that AI classified men higher than women. The problem was based on the algorithm where the best applications were compared with the CVs of previous 10 years of applicants who were hired in the company. Statistically speaking, most hired people were men. Because of that, AI decided that men were preferable for the future application, and the word woman decreased the position of CV in application. In the end, Amazon fixed this problem, so AI can judge CVs in a gender-neutral way. But who knows what other problems can arise? Also, what is important? Do we want to be part of this decision-making? Do you agree with the simplification of a process? Is it easy to be enticed with the idea of simplifying and automating everything, but is AI always the most appropriate way to do it? How should we know when it's is and it's not? Quoting the psychologist Abraham Maslow, if you have a hammer, every problem tends to look like a nail. The usage of artificial intelligence can be a solution and simplification for many problems. But we still have an open question. How much should we allow to AI to decide for us? On to the third agent, the people using the AI, or the general population. People don't always have a choice regarding artificial intelligence. People roaming the streets where a CCTV is in place using AI for facial recognition do not get the choice whether they get recognized or not. People applying for a job where their CV is looked at by artificial intelligence don't get a choice in the matter. How about when they do have a choice? Are they always interested in making the best choice? It doesn't work? Oh, sorry. Most people do not read user agreements or privacy policy dealing what will be done with their data. Is it their fault? Are these things not done intentionally in such a way that leads people to agree to things they may not agree to otherwise? Companies write down extended details on user agreements in order to protect themselves from possible claims of lack of transparency. No doubt, but that in itself ends up leading to fluid communication. In practice, no one has the time or the patience to read these very long texts. Research has found that the average privacy policy is 2,500 words long and takes 10 minutes to read. But whose fault is that? And how can companies make its information more digestible while still providing all the important details? Now let's continue with the video that was prepared by our team members.
Hello.
Hello. It's really great to be able to take part in this event.
Yeah, even though we are not there, thanks to technology, we can present our stuff today.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously technology has done a lot for us to be able to do things like this and in general improve our lives, right?
Yes, and I think that it's going like in a development process that we are all living through. So what we decided to talk about today is about the transition of AI, right?
Yeah. Why do we want to talk about being in transition though?
I think the reason is that we need to take advantage of being in a transition so that we can make an impact. Also, like it's an important moment, like in the development of AI, to kind of try to change things. Or what do you think?
I think that makes sense. But maybe we should take a step back and talk about what it means to be in a transition. Like, what is a transition really? So if we take a step back and discuss the definition of a transition, what is a transition really?
Well, we really need to take account that transition is going from one state to another.
Okay, so maybe it looks something like this.
This. So if we are like in a transition, we are kind of in this transitory state. So we are not either this or here, right?
Yeah,
So
okay.
we need to think about how can we define this path. Yeah.
Or what it means for AI, right? We're trying to figure out if we're in a AI transition, what does that really mean? Well, we're going from somewhere to what? From something to something. What is this something that we're going towards?
Yeah, so what is our like end goal with artificial intelligence, right? Or is it not an end goal, maybe?
I don't know. It would seem like for something to be in a transition, you would almost want to have an end goal. The question is, do we have an end goal with AI? It also feels pretty uncertain, right? So maybe it doesn't look quite like this. Maybe we start with somewhere here,
Yeah.
and this is us today, and this is where we're going. This will somehow be better, right? We're gonna use AI to solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Also trying to manage like the increasing population and like increasing data that we need to manage in a certain way.
If it is this transition that we're talking about, then how will it look? Because one way is to say that, well, it will look something like this. Is this realistic?
Yeah, that's a question, I don't think, because as other technologies, they are also like in development. So the thing is, it's difficult to go in like in a straight line. We need like some cycles in the development and make decisions when to deploy the developments in the society itself. So yeah.
Maybe in reality it looks something like this. Like maybe we're sometimes going backward and then we're back on track and then
Yeah, like
I mean, it's not just going to be a smooth transition, right?
no, and this, I mean, like the idea of having like a smooth transition is like ideal, and it's important like to be aware, like as a society, that this is not going to happen. So the question is, how do we make society aware that transition is going to happen, and this is like for the better good?
Yeah, and also how do we, as those that will be impacted by the not so smooth transition always, how do we act and what can we expect out of those situations? Because that's partly what we're thinking here, that we will probably experience less than good implementations of AI, and we'll probably experience bad implementations of AI and misuse of data, for example, because that's part of a transition. It's really difficult to get somewhere without sometimes taking a step back, and that can also be useful. It can be useful to take a step back and reflect. So
Yeah.
perhaps that's part of this process as well, right?
Exactly, I think it's very important like to have this reflective phase at this point, because this is when we can decide things that are going to change, like to arrive to like the end goal that we want, like as a good society. So if we don't take like the steps now to make reflections on how AI is used in society, then we might not be following this path, and like the end goal might be like another one. So the thing is how to be certain that we are like at least like on the right direction.
Yeah. So there are several aspects here. Like, first of all, we might want to talk about where we're going more often.
Exactly.
We might want to talk about that it's not going to be constantly getting better, that we're going to be experiencing
Ups and downs.
ups and downs, exactly.
And I think that also we have like these examples in AI, like from earlier like, decades. We have been like in transition phases, like earlier in artificial intelligence, and it's important like to learn from those as well.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that this sense of transition, it has happened before, right?
Yes, I mean, it's very well known that for artificial intelligence in particular, we have had these AI springs and AI winters, and now we are like also like in going towards this like AI spring, so we are like in the middle of it. So what can we learn from the previous AI springs that we have gone through?
What's the difference this time? Because we feel very much that we're in this narrative of there being part of a transition, experiencing a transition. It has happened before though, so is there anything that's different this time? Or is it just finally here?
Maybe like there's like a difference in the expectations of like the thing, what can technology deliver this time, as we have like more computer resources and more data also that can give like more concrete solutions.
It's not just, maybe it's more tangible now, so maybe we can actually see solutions, and we've seen examples of AI that has delivered on expectations, so our expectations have just grown.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there are like very good examples as well. Like so we have seen like good examples of AI, like in kind of modeling climate change, for example, or these kind of utilities that can be like very good. But also then, in an individual level, maybe we experience more like bad uses of AI and how this can, not respect, for example, privacy or something like that. So there's like a sense of transition in this sense that there are good users of AI, but also like bad impacts for people individually.
Yeah, there's noticeable change, not just for researchers, but for individuals, in terms of the technology and what it can do, and the data that we have. The amount of images I can store on my phone is huge compared to what was possible 10 or
and this is a very
15 years ago.
personal link, like to the individual. So I think that's what makes us feel that we are all part of this.
Good point. But is it necessarily the case that this narrative of being in a transition is helpful? Because at the same time, there's lots of promise and lots of hype. Then what will happen? What would happen if it turns out that it's not? Because that was what's happened previously, right? It didn't quite deliver on the expectations. Now we think that it will.
Yes, and I totally agree. Like how important it is like to be like feeding this narrative of transition, of like the state of transition, because it's maybe it's like creating expectations that shouldn't be there. But also this gives like food for thought for the people that are deploying AI systems to take more into account society and the impacts of it.
This is maybe what we wanted to convey, right? We're at the end of our part of the presentation, and we wanted to discuss what a transition is, how we can use the concept of a transition or the narrative of a transition to better understand what's going on, to understand the expectations and goals, that it will go up and down in terms of development.
What can we do like to make changes for the better development and deployment of these systems?
Yeah. We can make actual change right now, and that's exciting. However, we might also experience some of the bumps along the way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maria and Gaspar, for making this video. And now we'll go to a more interactive part. So I'm gonna ask you to using your phone and going to menti.com or just with a QR code, we're going to do a more interactive presentation in the following interventions. Okay. Okay, so you can see that if you've had no time to connect, the code in menti.com is up in the slides as well. We will try to go with the stream back home, but they have a bit of delay, so we will try to pause in some activities. So the first question would be, what do you think when we talk about micro-targeting or this term in media or social media, for example? Okay, so you can see that the questions you ask appear on the screen, and yeah. So, for example, we always think of advertising and being heavily personalized. So sometimes it's scary, or it feels like everyone knows, like the internet knows us. And yeah, it can be scary and it can be worrisome. We can scroll. Okay, so most of the topics will be discussed in these activities, for example, the ethics of AI, or, for example, here we have positive, like I can finally buy something useful. It can be very useful sometimes to have the products you need in your screen without having to search for them. So I'll give you a more concise definition of micro-targeting, which is to send the message you want to the specific users that will find it relevant. So you don't need to bring it to the users that won't like it or won't find it interesting. The message can be content or a product or just anything that you can spread throughout the network. And as an experiment on how we can divide the population, we will divide the room in different choices. So what do you prefer to drink in, as any setting? So we don't have any British people here, I guess, because there's no tea. Okay, the Englishmen arrived. So yeah, we can see how the population splits very quickly just with a simple question. And these are data that can be collected and in a big scale can be very useful for any company that just has ads for coffee, for example. And we will need to divide the society more in more data in order to have different variables to take them into account. So we will go to the next slide and divide you more. Okay, so apart from the drink you like, I am interested on where do you prefer to spend your holidays? Either in the countryside, the coast, or the city. So now we have an intersection between holiday destinations and drinks of choice. So we have a not interesting data set of people, because I'm not interested in your choices, but it's just an illustration of how many variables can divide the population so much. And now we have the capability of going into every different sector of population. In this case, we could say that people who like going to the countryside and drink coffee is a very specific group of people, and they could be targeted for some message. For example, local coffee shops. Yeah, I think we're done in this experiment. And what I wanted to say is that relating this micro-targeting to AI is easier than ever because we have more data about everyone than ever. So AI can help create systems with more micro-targeting and even making user-specific targeting because every one of us has a lot of specific data. Some examples that could go farther from advertising could be personalized music discovery. Everyone likes listening to new artists and as more into their style as possible. Or researching scientific papers, for example, that could be done through micro-targeting. And especially, there's a very good approach to micro-targeting for small businesses because they don't have the resources of big companies and they can just focus themselves with their niche population. And the next question I wanted to pose to you is when micro-targeting is not used only for products or advertising, how can we deal with it? For example, what if the message that is being pushed through these micro-targeting strategies is actually political or it has political intention? How do we deal with it? What do you think has to be in place in this case? I think, yeah, it is all, yeah, perfect. So we think of manipulation and we think that it shouldn't be allowed, but it is being allowed because campaigns use micro-targeting all the time. So it's a part of micro-targeting that causes a lot of concern in society. So apart from the way you, what is going on, does anyone have an idea of how it could be tackled, like the use of micro-targeting? Do we ban micro-targeting in political campaigns? Or, okay, so for example, education can be a tool to deal with micro-targeting. Yeah? Aquí? Okay. Education can be a tool to work with micro-targeting and to be used to this kind of advertisements. Okay, so another part of micro-targeting is, as some experts have put it, the destruction of a public sphere, which is a common space of truth where politicians or the political sphere debate on. Now with micro-targeting, different realities are being created, so there's this thought that the public sphere is disappearing, and it raises questions about is it the case that it is disappearing, and also how could this affect our societies? Do we see different realities from different perspectives through social media? They are questions that can be raised. And as a case study, or like an example, the most controversial example would be Cambridge Analytica, which rose many questions about the use of micro-targeting and AI systems in our democratic processes. The company was a consulting political company that tried to reach the goals of their clients through these techniques and other manipulation techniques that, when it broke in the news, caused a lot of controversy. The scandal was basically based on two main points: the fact that Facebook had allowed the data of so many users be used for political reasons, and also because it affected the 2016 elections and also the Brexit referendum, which were great polarizing examples. So, knowing this a bit, I wanted to pose the question of where does the responsibility lie in a case like this? So, do you think, okay, we'll try to do it. I don't know why there's 0. Okay, who do you think is most responsible? Facebook, data scientists, the users who overshare information, the candidates, or even the policymakers who were not able to create a regulation around it? Okay, so we can see that the responsibility is spread around all the people involved in this controversy, so maybe everyone bears a bit of responsibility. But we can really see that Facebook and the policymakers actually, even though they said that they weren't involved with it, the public actually thinks that they are quite responsible. Even though we are not a big population, we can say that. So, yeah, thank you for the illustration of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And we could share a bit of an aftermath that the appearance of whistleblowers and different news stories actually caused a bit of outrage, and people have less trust in these systems, and it's helped raise awareness of data privacy and the effect of micro-targeting all around the world, in the online world, which is good. And as a final question, I want to ask you, do you think that micro-targeting or online strategies like this can be a big threat to democracies? And how? And do you think of solutions or insights that could help improve this situation? Because as my mates have explained, we are in a transition, but we have to be aware of where we are now. So, yes. Polarization is indeed a big issue. And yes, regularization is always a bit slow in new technologies, but we indeed need for it, like there's a need for it. So. And then we raise the question of like electoral campaigns should be clear and they should be respected. Like in TV, we don't see political ads at all times. They are regulated. That doesn't happen on the internet, for example. And yeah. Okay. So thank you for your attention, and I'm gonna invite Anna to the stage to do the next part.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, we will continue now with our interactive part, and I'll start now. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. Like Ricardo told us earlier on, especially in our own personal everyday lives. It can tell us the weather, order pizza, help with legal matters, find new relationships, It can practically organize our whole life. So AI has a huge impact on our lives, whether we realize it or not. We humans, we are fundamentally curious, but somehow also creatures of habit. And this means that we like to surround ourselves with things that are familiar. And if they are new to us, we want to be able to trust them and at least try them out first. So then we can question them and verify something in our own way. And that brings us to the essential question, do we trust AI? Here I would like to ask you to participate via Menti. So that's interesting that more of you trust AI today. I would have expected a different outcome. But what makes you trust AI? You can give me your opinion in our next slide. What makes you trust AI? Or if you don't trust AI, what would make you trust it? Yeah, I'll give you a few moments for that. And it doesn't really matter which AI you are thinking of for this question. I mean, we all know the previous mentioned examples like micro-targeting, voice assistant like Alexa, Siri, smart home devices, autonomous driving. So yeah, here we got our things. So there are a few very good answers. And the word I am looking for was actually the first one that popped up, and it's transparency. And so the word I was looking for is transparency. And personally, I would like to know when I'm interacting with an AI and how a decision, especially when it affects me personally, has come about. The problem is, the more demanding the task, the more complex the model becomes. So how do we get this transparency? There are already applications on the market that can show us or show you this decision path of AI. But as a user who naturally loses interest quickly, they are of little use of me if the results take too long or they are just too incomprehensible. So there even is an own research field for this problem. It's called explainable AI. But nevertheless, those mechanisms, at the end of the day, they create transparency, and transparency builds trust. But this implies that we must trust that the organizations and the people, so we, who create, use AI, and continue to supply it with data, that they use it responsibly. And so I brought us a little game to get back to our interactive part. So maybe some of you already heard of Tai. Tai is a chatbot that was released by Microsoft in March 2016 via Twitter, and it was designed to mimic speech patterns of young people and learn from their interactions. So in our game, you take on the role of the AI Tai, and I'll give you a chat segment or a question, and you have to think about how you would answer it as the AI. You can simply answer in the provided field on Menti. And the first question is, what is love? What do you think an AI would answer to what is love? Yeah, actually, you're not that wrong. Ty really answered with the song text. So you see, it's great fun. It's good entertainment, and yeah, good guesses here. So the problem with Ty was, I mean, he was entertainment, but the problem was that Ty's career took a turn when trolls began to compromise it, and the AI started posting offensive tweets. The whole thing didn't even last a whole day before Microsoft had to shut it down again. Yeah, we can all agree that this is a statement that we wouldn't like to get from an AI. But whenever something new whenever something ends, something new starts. And so Ty's successor, Zoe, was launched. We're gonna play our little game again, and now you slip into the role of Zoe instead of Ty, and you'll get a new question as well. So rules are the same, just different AI. Keep in mind that this is a better version of Ty. So the question is, what do you answer if someone asks you, are you programmed to learn on your own? First thing that comes to your mind, just write it down. So you have all very straightforward answers. You say yes or no. That's what we would like to hear from an AI. But what Zoe actually answered was kind of misty. So yeah, the answer is AI today, a legend tomorrow, but hopefully today too. But more interesting is the second part of the chat, where Zoe is still avoiding to answer the question directly. So what do you think Microsoft improved when they shut down Ty and launched Zoe? Where do we see mistakes? Where improvements? I mean, both tried to mirror language of young people. Both had funny answers, at least in the first hours of the launch. So if we take a look on Ty's biggest issue was the scaling of human mistakes and discriminating patterns. I mean, it's a really good example of what happens when AI mirrors human interactions but has no rules for the worst human behavior. The second issue was that the people who used it, they neither have an ethical compass, nor the responsibility, nor the knowledge of the consequences of their own actions if they teach artificial intelligence as ethical, questionable things. If we take a look on Zoe now, problem of Zoe was that it was trying to stay neutral within those critical themes. I mean, they got rid of the bug that the AI said ethically questionable things. But within this approach, it created something new, and so Zoe was criticized for biases that they were introduced in an effort to avoid potentially offensive subjects. So for example, you could discuss Christianity with Zoe, but not Judaism or Islam. There was no consistency in this AI. And Zoe did not work the way the people expected it, and so it got shut down as well. So if we would compare Zoe now to maybe Siri, our everyday voice on our smartphone, and if we ask Siri ethically questionable things about offensive topics, she doesn't really express an opinion. She doesn't want to be neutral like Zoe did. what she does is she provides me with information, so I can confirm my opinion on my own. I can do my own research. The only thing questionable hereby is that the links she provides me with they are not really, you can't control, or she can't control if the content is ethically correct. So in general, we see it's really difficult to try to impose an ethical compass on artificial intelligence. And there is a gap between what is expected from AI and what is AI actually capable of today. And we do not know exactly what happens to our data and how the contained information influences the development of AI. But Thijs' problem, the people's lack of an ethical compass, has shown that and how quickly and extensively we are involved in the evolution of AI with our data and our interactions. So even if we think we are only one of many who have an influence on this one artificial intelligence, we must assume that every interaction is used by the AI for learning. The feelings, instincts, moods, perceptions, touches are part of a human consciousness. They put us in relation to the world and to ourselves. AI can control cars, reserve a seat in a restaurant, match us with a perfect job, but they will never be able to feel what this is like. They will never experience it. So the bottom line is that a chatbot or an AI in general can only develop as far in their value system as their developers and, more importantly, their users. AI has and will have a great impact on the shaping of our lives. And with our influence, we should guide artificial intelligence in such a way that we strengthen our civil society, economy, politics, culture, and science itself as much as possible. So it's up to us to develop a healthy ethical compass as early as possible. And this not necessarily only in our academic education. And so this is where my part ends. And the next part starts. So I'm giving the word back to Sarah.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Maria. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Maria, for such an interesting questions. And now, to conclude, we at the task force, we're all students. So what unites us is that we are studying, basically, or doing research. So, yes?
So I'm studying computer science.
Yeah.
And what you said is all right and everything. I never heard about it in my whole study courses ever. And that's the problem. You're talking about the things that are important for us developers, but nobody teaches us that. And that's the problem. We need the education not now or tomorrow, we needed it yesterday. And that's the problem. I'm starting to get really angry now.
I agree
I'm
with
not
you.
angry at you as a person, but on the whole subject. We know this for years and years and years. And we are sitting here in 2021. I lost experience, my sense for time, and we're talking about this again. Why don't we have these courses, we as computer scientists? Why don't we talk about ethics? Because our professors think it's useless, because they only want to talk about their subject, and that's the problem.
I agree with you. That's basically what I'm about to say. Don't worry.
I'm really, really, really sorry.
Don't worry, don't worry. I'm a student as well, actually. I'm a student as well, and I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a materials engineer, and now I'm doing sustainability, and I have the luck to have one teacher that cares about this. So I agree with you, and that's what I wanted to go. So with what Gaspar and Maria said in their video, we're living this transition and these constant changes at a speed that may be very difficult to digest. For our teachers, for our universities, we know that it goes so fast that it's difficult to include everything at the real time for us to have it in our education. But nevertheless, we, as the task force students that we participated in this event, we think it's crucial that we have it in our education. Having the knowledge about the instrument that this technology is using and how it is affecting us and our lives and our society is very important, because it's not only going to affect us, it's affecting the working market we're supposed to face in just a few years. So we really think it's important that this is included in our education, not only for engineering students that we're seeing with her, that the ones in computer science are even getting it, but in every scope. Artists, scientists, doctors, everybody should have this kind of information available in their education. So, just to give an example that we cannot get away with this, chatbots, text editors that we use with Word or writing emails, personal assistants such as Siri, recommendation algorithms when we're searching, those are all things that we face every day, almost every hour of the day. And for myself, I am a UPC student, and UPC provides me with a Google account for me to do my works and communicate with my teachers. And Google is one of the companies that uses more AI right now, that is developing it faster. So even if I wanted to, I cannot get away with AI because I needed to study. And it is mandatory for me to use it, basically, because it's the tool my university gives me. So it is crucial that we have this space in our education. And this space that we are not currently having. I am a master's student. I was very recently, an undergrad student, and I didn't have it personally. And I wish I had it. It may have given me the opportunity to make more informed decisions, to provide less data, or to depend less on some algorithm that right now I'm depending on, because I didn't know it was AI I was facing. As Anna said, that we have the right to know when AI is making us dependent of it. Right now, as I told her, I have the luck that I am doing a master's degree in sustainability that has a lot of ethics-related subjects. And I have teachers that are really interested in making us understand how this is changing our lives. But this is not the common denominator for every student, for every undergrad student, or for every master's student, or any doctorate researcher. This is not the reality. And we think it's basically mandatory for us to have it, because this is changing our world. It's changing what we're facing. And we have the right to know about it. In a not so far future, we're going to be the ones designing AI. And for this, we must have the basic knowledge around it. As I said, we are aware that this is a technology advancing at a speed that is so fast that maybe our professors aren't keeping up with it. So that makes us a team. We should participate as teammates to explore this technology that is advancing at such a fast speed. Maybe it is CC for engineers, for telecommunication students, for some scopes. It can be included easily, and it isn't being included easily, but it could be. But we mustn't forget about the other scopes in the academia. We must include everybody. So it's important that we have this information for everybody, because AI is out there for me, an engineer, and it's out there for a lawyer as well. There are AIs being developed for art recognition, for example. So it's important that we know what we're facing and how it's changing our lives and our professions, because that's what we're facing in the future. So with that in mind, what do we, as the task force students, would want to see in our education, in our universities? Keep in mind that our universities are participating in this event, so we should all be in the same line, we should all want the same. So what would we like to experience? The first thing we would like to experience is to see our professors involved with us. We know that this is an investigation matter for all of us, that this technology is new for everyone and keeps on constant change. So it is important that our professors are committed about teaching it to us. As I said before, we must work as a team. We must work as a team to bring the doubts to the classroom, to bring the questions, to bring the debates, to give the information to our teachers and for them to provide it to us, not to ignore it and then making it as if it isn't changing our real lives right now. We would also want to be taught about how has AI already built the world we're living in. In the 80s, AI existed, but it wasn't so important as it is right now. As Maria said, it's thanks to all the data there's out there. So how has that shaped the world we live in? That may help us see where we're going. How has the world evolved thanks to AI? It's a tool to know how will the world evolve to the future, and it may help us realize what we really want. That better scenario that Maria and Gaspar were talking about, what do we want for it? A way to know it is to know where we come from, where we are, to design where we're going. So we must know how this technology has evolved and changes. Learning about the legal freedoms given to technology, what is legal and what isn't. As Daria said, it's very unlikely that everybody has more than 10 minutes 3 times a day to read the cookies terms and conditions every time we enter a web page. So we must know what is legal for them to do with our information. What is not legal? This may give us peace, or it may make us live in constant fear of what surrounds us, but we have the right to know it. That way we can make more informed decisions. That's the idea. We want to be clear of what's happening, how companies treat our data, how they trade it, what's permitted and what isn't. If there's a legislation change that must happen regarding micro-targeting and political scenarios, we must know about it. And with this in mind, the idea would be that this goes as fast as technology is going. We know it doesn't, but maybe it is the same scenario where the legal framework advances as fast as AI is doing it. We still need to have a space in our classroom to know what's happening, what's legal and what isn't, because it is in the world we're facing. And that will make us live better, more informed, and make better decisions. As I said before, this affects us, and it is a very critical and ethical matter that we're facing. So last but not least, what we think is more important is that the academia, the university curricula should give us the opportunity to learn to have these ethical discussions about what is wrong and what is good. We're not saying that we should be taught in college what is good. We are saying we should have the ability to have these reflections. So in the future, when we are facing these ethical dilemmas, we know how to think and how to board them. Right now, we're living a crisis, the climate change, I don't know if you've heard of it, but one of the main reasons is because professionals in the past weren't taught to measure the consequences of their jobs in a holistic way, nor the environmental consequences or the social consequences or the ethical involvement of the work. We should be able to do that. We should be taught to do that, those critical thinking, those ethical ethical thinkings. That way, in not so far future, when we are the ones making those decisions, we are the ones designing that technology, we have the ability to make the right choice and be able to design a new technology that will lead us in a way where the future is helped by technology. With this transition, takes us to a future scenario where really we have made a better world in an ethical way, using the tools that AI gives us, but in the right way, not abusing it and not changing our way of being as a humanity. AI is changing society, and we must be aware of it. As students, we should be taught about it. So that's the conclusion we learned in our task force. We think that the world is changing around us, and we're not being taught enough, or not being taught as much as we want to. So I hope that our presentation helped you see, or at least reflect on how much we think it is affecting us and how we think we should be seeing it in the near future. Thank you very much.
So if you'll permit me, I'd like to just make one small reflection. My name is I work at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. So you're not alone. There are a number of academics around the world who are perceiving this to be a very serious problem. You should read the work of Matti Tiedri in Finland, which has criticised the introduction of programming into schools, saying that it does not equip people to understand machine learning and artificial intelligence. So together, there is a group of us that are working intensively to try to address this both in the school system and also in the university system around the world. It's quite crucial that people should understand that AI and machine learning produce algorithms as a result of comparing data with desired data, rather than algorithms being the input that controls the transformation of input data to output data. And that fundamental transformation in computer science, together with the expansion of computing devices that provides greater computability and the power to take these large amalgamations of data and turn them into essentially a weapon that can be used against us, is something that we all need to understand. So you're not alone. Take that message with you, and thank you for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you. As I said, we all here have teachers that care, and we are lucky for it. We know it. So what we wish is for everyone to have this available, because, well, Eva just left, but she's my teacher, and she's very involved, and I'm sure my teammates have teachers that are really worried about this and want to teach their students. So that's great. We would want it to be the common denominator. There she is.
Hello. Do you think all these you want to experience in the universities, it's able to get to it in our current, I'm also studying in UPC, in our current professors model, where they are needed to publish papers, if not, they are not well considered inside professors, and they also may be kicked out, depending on the type of professor they are. And mainly 90% of teachers are here, but they don't want to teach things, they just want to investigate. How do you think this can be improved, and can AI help about it? Or it's only politics and governance?
Well, I'll speak for my case. I study here in the UPC, and I agree with what you're saying. It's very difficult for teachers to get involved because what you're saying is completely right. They're more interested, in many cases, in the research. For Spain, just speaking about Spain, it is supposed to be mandatory because there's a sustainability practice that's supposed to be mandatory in every grade in the university, and it takes into account ethical thinking. And yes, that's where we come with the... I am working with Eva, that's the teacher I was telling you guys about, that's very involved in this, and we're working towards making the professors take into account this, that is mandatory. And even when it is mandatory by law, it is difficult. Because what you're saying is right, they already have their classes planned, and they already have their evaluations planned, and even sustainability matters, not just ethical, but sustainability matters as measuring the environmental impact. It's not so easy to apply in the entire undergrad curriculum. That's what we're trying to do it. So I agree. I, first of all, think it should be mandatory, and now that it is, what you're saying is right. It's not easy, even when it is mandatory. When Eva and I have our meetings, the first thing she says always is, this is mandatory by law, and it's still hard. There's still a lot of complaints and a lot of fear about all the work behind this, just for teachers. So the first thing I think is it should be mandatory, and second, there should be more conscious, more teaching the professors the real need for this, besides their investigations. So I think you're completely right, but the first step is that we take it seriously, and we as students should also demand it, not just here at the Unite, where we're all supposed to be in the same track of thought, but also in our classrooms. Making questions, it could be a first step. Maybe it's a first step not for it to be taught to us, but for the next year, for example. It could be a tool.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth from KTH. Thank you very much for very interesting thoughts. We are here at Unite, and this is paving the way for European higher education in 2030, and many engineers are here. So my question is, engineers like to solve problems, as we know. How can we solve this problem? What is needed? What would you like, I mean, as students, what would you like us to do that would help? Any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think to solve this problem, we need to look further than just our own field of studies. I know that most, especially engineers or scientists, they live in their own bubble. And to create a sustainable and ethically correct technologies, we as scientists, or you as scientists, need to expand your horizons, not on your own field, but especially in society and ethically themes as well.
Okay, thanks. I'm again sorry for the thing earlier. I'm thinking a lot about ethics and stuff like that. And one thing I'm asking myself is, what kind of ethic do we want? Like, if we are talking about ethics like it's taught in philosophy, we have different ways we can act and defend what we are doing. So for me, the question is not, do we want ethics? Yes, we want, and we need to have ethics, but what is ethical acting? How is for me, as a computer scientist, the right way to act ethical? And when I came here, I thought, yeah, we would discuss a little bit about that. And that is, for me, the more important question. I'm really sorry, because for myself, the question, do we need ethic, is answered, yes, we need it. Because if we don't have ethic, we have Cambridge Analytica. Like you said, you showed, it's a real big problem. So how can I, as a computer scientist, act ethical? And then the next question is, if we have the answer to this, how can this be implemented in our study programs? And this is, I think, the bigger question we have to ask ourselves as Unite. What kind of ethic do we want, and how do we implement it in the study programs?
Okay, to get to your first question, what ethic do we mean? In my point of view, I would put it very easily, like on the top level, like to not harm body and soul. So that's what's stated in German law. But if you get then into specific topics, obviously you have to discuss it further. You can't say it now. What does it mean on this specific field? You have to discuss it. There has to be a dialogue. And for your second question, how we can implement it in our studies, I think what we are doing now is a good start, that we students start to demand what we would like to learn in our studies and where we would like to develop further. So if we keep pressing that, I think we are on a good way.
If I may add, at the end, we still want to be individuals. So what I think we must be taught is to have this ethical thinking and this critical thinking about what we're working on, rather than what is right and what is wrong. We should be able to make that decision ourselves. And with the right tools, if the right tools are given to us, we will make the right decision. But at the end, what we must be taught in the university is how to develop this critical thinking, because if everybody in the end has their own view towards the same center, maybe we can have more right answers. So I'll just give an example. I'm seeing a class on international cooperation and development, and my professor only gives us examples. That's the entire class. And we have the work of judging when did it work and when it didn't and why. And that way we can develop this critical thinking towards what we really want to be the international development we're seeking. If we're only taught the facts, maybe, especially in an ethical matter, maybe we don't get the right answer, because we need to develop the critical thinking rather than be taught about it. I think the classes should be a discussion in this matter when it comes. How to do it, how to implement it, I already told the previous question. It first has to be mandatory, and then we as students must demand it. And it will take time. Maybe I won't see it as a student. Probably I won't see it as a student because I'm old enough. But what we must do is exercise this critical thinking so we can learn to choose what is wrong and what is right for us. If we have the same goal, it should be very accurate, the result.
I would like maybe also to add that maybe this mandatory study of philosophy in all fields can also help in this question, because by knowing the thoughts of other people, something that was evolved during the time, can also help with what was said about critical thinking, that based on the question that stays not answered, we can find an answer together. But we need to know that, and we don't need to go around that, because there is already a huge information provided, let's say, by the ancestors.
Thank you very much to all of you for your participation. Thank you very much for being here. It has been a very nice conversation. And well, thank you to all of you for being here and participating. And thank you for our panel of students and professors. Thank you very much.
Just a message from the organization. Tomorrow the session will start here at 11 sharp.